For whom does she call? The Chinese leader urgently spoke by phone with the Kremlin's vassal. Will he let him go to meet with Trump? The meeting place can be changed. Trump suggested a meeting with the decorated one in the Vatican, but Putin fears him like the devil fears holy water. Operation Web 2.0. Where did the friendly drones take off from this time? And those born in the swamps shouldn't fly. Ethiopia delivered an aerial slap to Russia. All this and more coming up in the episode, so while you're watching, don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel Ukraine Today. So, Xi Jinping enters the game. Apparently the Chinese leader isn't too pleased about the upcoming meeting between Trump and Putin, so he decided to give his vassal some advice and had a phone conversation with Putin. According to Reuters, citing Chinese state television CCTV, the details of the conversation are not yet known. Putin himself started acting like a capricious young lady choosing a place for a date. No sooner had Fox News, citing sources, reported that Italy was being considered as one of the possible venues for a Trump-Putin meeting, then Russian media promptly rejected this option, modestly avoiding any details as to why their great and terrible leader is afraid to travel to a NATO country, where the Rome Statute is also in effect. Today will show just how much he fears Trump. The deadline set by Donald Trump for Putin expires today. In reality, there is no ceasefire. How will the US respond? Will Trump hit Russia with tough sanctions? All the details are in our international review.
Today, Azerbaijani President Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan will sign a peace agreement at the White House. The agreement provides for the creation of a strategic transit corridor that will run through Armenia to Azerbaijani territory and will be under US control.
A huge blow to Putin's ambitions, the meeting between Pashinyan and Aliyev in Washington, because Moscow has traditionally considered itself the hegemon in the South Caucasus region. And today we see that the long-standing conflict and numerous disagreements between Armenia and Azerbaijan are being addressed in Washington. And obviously this is a big victory for Trump.
It seems like this is a clear signal to Putin that his involvement no longer carries weight and that Russia is losing its influence in the Caucasus.
I hope to reach some agreements that will put the situation not only between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also in the region as a whole, on a path of constructive development.
This may also indicate a resolution of the tense situation in the Caucasus and, obviously, without Moscow's involvement, yet another confirmation that Putin's adventure regarding the invasion of Ukraine has weakened him in several strategic areas at once.
Indian companies are refusing Russian oil after Trump imposed tariffs and accused them of financing the war against Ukraine.
President Trump made it very clear that it is unacceptable for India to continue financing this war by purchasing oil from Russia. People will be shocked to learn that India, in fact, relies on China to purchase Russian oil.
This is more of a forced move because it is obviously beneficial for India to buy cheap Russian oil, but under the pressure of tariffs and moreover under the position of the American president, they have to adjust their course accordingly. And in principle, we are now witnessing a shift in India's economic policy.
At the same time, the Indian authorities continue to insist that giving up cheap oil is not in their national interest.
For us, the well-being of our farmers is of the highest value. India will never compromise on the well-being of its farmers, dairy industry, and fishermen. And I personally know that I will have to pay a high price for this. But I am ready for it, and my country is ready for it.
It is obvious that the tariffs imposed by the US on India look quite threatening. And as the political leader of this country, Modi still has to take the position of the United States into account. Because unlike China, India does not have such a large economy or such extensive connections in other parts of the world.
Putin has already confirmed a meeting with Trump next week and announced that he plans to meet in the Emirates.
We have many wonderful friends who are readily prepared and willing to help us organize an important event of this particular kind. This is largely because one of our very influential friends, specifically the esteemed President of the United Arab Emirates, I think we will ultimately decide, but that would certainly be one of the most suitable, indeed quite appropriate and highly convenient places for such an event.
The Russian dictator is still not ready to meet with President Zelensky.
I have already said repeatedly that I have nothing against it in general. It is possible, but certain conditions must be created for this. But as for creating such conditions, we are still far from that.
Today marks the expiration of another Trump deadline given to Putin to end the war. When asked whether Trump would impose secondary sanctions as he had previously promised, he gave an evasive answer.
That will depend on him. We are going to see what he says. It all depends on him, but I am very disappointed.
As of today, to say that we have any confirmation or that Putin has shown any desire to end the war, there is simply none. But at the same time, the Kremlin profoundly understands the inherently unstable psyche of the American president and is actively making the absolute most of a certain perceived vacuum in Trump's mind to carefully adjust both the overall scope of potential threats voiced by America and, quite obviously, to significantly modify direct actions that could negatively and profoundly affect Russia's crucial ability to continue this ongoing and protracted war.
Judging by the latest statement, the US president does not intend to meet with Putin in person, but wants the meeting to be in a trilateral format with Zelensky.
They both truly want to meet with me, and I fully agree and will indeed do everything humanly possible to stop the ongoing killing.
Recent events clearly show that Putin's opinion is carrying less and less weight in international politics, and most important decisions, even in so-called allied countries, are now being made without Russia's involvement.
A summer drone show has begun in Sochi. According to SHOT, the Ukrainian armed forces sent Layuchi drones to Kuban, after which the authorities closed all beaches in Sochi. The sounds of air defense systems firing were also heard in Anapa, Slavyansk on Kuban, and Adler. Rosaviatsia announced the closure of Sochi airport. Previously, the airport in Gelendzhik was also closed. It resumed operations last month after a 3-year hiatus. Baza reports that 55 flights have been rescheduled at Sochi airport due to the cover plan. Many planes, including those flying from Dubai, Novosibirsk, Moscow, and Samara, circled the area around the city for hours, waiting for permission to land. In addition, against the backdrop of the Ukrainian drone raid, the Piso checkpoint on the Russian-Abkhazian border was closed. So, in this context, it's not at all surprising to see the hysteria on Russian public channels of the so-called Z military correspondents claiming that Operation Web 2.0 has begun in Russia. At the Engels Air Base, there was a lot of anxiety about a possible attack by Ukrainian drones, but instead they struck the military base in Milerovo. And that's in the Rostov region. Meanwhile, Ukrainian border guards eliminated enemy infantry, destroyed motor vehicles, cars, and armored vehicles in the Donetsk region. All the details are in our military review.
The threat of mobile homes? No, this isn't the plot of another blockbuster, but a new phobia among Russians. Online, rumors are spreading that allegedly on the night of August 8th, drones and FPVs were launched from a Toyota cargo truck. Meanwhile, while Russians were trying to figure out what these haunted houses, or rather drone houses, were, those very drones were causing explosions at strategic sites in Russia. Thus, drones arrived at Milerovo in the Rostov region during the night. The target was most likely the local military airfield. Explosions were heard in the city at night, after which local residents saw a glow from the fire.
The extensive and meticulously planned SBU operation, codenamed Web, which was executed deep within the vast and strategically significant Russian territory, unequivocally demonstrated the profound and far-reaching potential for effectively employing unconventional guerrilla tactics against critical and highly sensitive strategic military targets, thereby showcasing a new dimension in modern warfare and operational capabilities. This poses a serious threat to Russians, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a house on wheels. Now, Russians have this association. Here comes a trailer, a house on wheels. That's the source of the threat.
The Russians claim that their air defense repelled all the attacks, but as we know, videos on the internet don't burn. Unlike the fuel tanks at the attacked GSMRT base.
Before striking Ukraine, these planes have to take off, then land at Engels, load the missiles meticulously prepared there, refuel their tanks, take off again, fly to the distant Caspian Sea, and launch the missiles from there. So, the Engels Air Base still remains a critically important key point for these massive and devastating missile strikes.
There is news about yet another expulsion of the Wagner PMC, this time from Africa. Russia is insisting on winding down the activities of the private military company Wagner in the Central African Republic and replacing it with the Africa Corps, which is controlled by the Russian Ministry of Defense. This was reported by the Associated Press, citing sources. In addition, Moscow is reportedly demanding that the security services it provides be paid for not with natural resources as before, but in cash.
The Wagner PMC is conducting the main combat operations against the rebels. And in fact, the local government relies specifically on the actions of the Wagner PMC. In addition, I would note that the Wagner PMC maintains a presence directly on the territory of the Republic of Belarus. According to various estimates, there are between 4,000 and 5,000 people.
The Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has switched from anger to mercy, or rather is creating the appearance of it, in order to continue deceiving US President Donald Trump. To this end, Putin has even agreed to meet with Trump to discuss the war in Ukraine.
By raising the stakes in this way, the Russian dictator is well aware that the Russian economy is facing enormous problems. In July alone, the budget deficit increased by 1.2 trillion rubles.
The enemy isn't getting out of this. That's just the Kremlin's way. So thanks to deception, the Russians managed to circumvent the sanctions and even purchase equipment from the German company Siemens for the state-owned explosives manufacturer.
Even in a globalized world, it is extremely difficult to prevent purchases for the Russian Federation's military-industrial complex, which uses either shell companies or accordingly intermediary countries. That is, through third countries, both the necessary raw materials and equipment for the Russian Federation's military-industrial complex are being purchased, with the end consumer listed not as the Russian side, but, for example, a company in Pakistan or in China or in a number of other countries in the Middle and Near East.
On the night of August 8th, Russia once again attacked Ukraine from the air. The enemy used 108 aerial attack weapons. Air Defense Forces neutralized 82 targets, including 3 jet-powered drones.
These are not entirely new drones. They are essentially upgraded old ones, modernized versions of the previous older models. But indeed, the overall level of danger is significantly increasing. Look, while the enemy primarily used Shaheds with gasoline-powered internal combustion engines, they flew relatively slowly. They were comparatively slow targets, making them easier to intercept. That's precisely why the effective countermeasures employed against them were more or less exactly the same.
Nevertheless, Ukrainian defenders managed to repel enemy attacks both in the air and on the ground. Russia continues to suffer enormous losses in its war against Ukraine. According to reports from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, over the past day, the Ukrainian army eliminated 1,040 occupiers, as well as 7 tanks and armored combat vehicles.
Russia is once again brandishing its nuclear club, this time with the Burevestnik missile, also known as the nuclear Chernobyl. These Kremlin plans are evidenced by increased activity at the Pankovo test site on the Novaya Zemlya archipelago. We will tell you about yet another attempt by the Russian Federation to escalate nuclear confrontation.
Russia is preparing new tests of one of its 5 types of so-called wonder weapons. We're talking about the Burevestnik missile, which has been dubbed the Flying Chernobyl in the US, all because of its nuclear engine.
The missile is dangerous because if its reactor is destroyed, whether it's shot down, crashes, or suffers an accident, a large area, quite a large area, will be contaminated. And no sane person wants that. That's why the Americans abandoned this environmentally unfriendly project back then.
Nuclear weapons expert Decker Evelet drew attention to the fact that the Kremlin is preparing to test its own analog of this weapon. According to him, this is evidenced by increased activity at the Pankovo test site on the Novaya Zemlya archipelago. In addition, possible tests are indicated by the fact that the US sent an Air Force radiation reconnaissance aircraft to Novaya Zemlya. This aircraft is equipped with sensors to monitor nuclear tests. Later, Newsweek noted that the aircraft took off from the British airbase Mildenhall and circled over the Barents Sea for about 14 hours.
If it explodes, it will contaminate everything around it. That's why, as soon as the Russians start talking about planning to test something and begin actively making a show of it, an American reconnaissance plane or radiation monitoring aircraft is immediately sent to that area to circle around and record everything that's happening.
The development of the Burevestnik began in Russia back in 2001, but it was only in 2018 that Putin publicly announced it. He did so with great pomp. He claimed that its range was unlimited and that its flight path could be unpredictable. During this time, Russia tested the Burevestnik 13 times, and all attempts ended in failure, although one is actually considered a success. On that occasion, the Russian wonder weapon managed to fly as far as 35 kilometers.
Out of 13 launches, all were unsuccessful. One launch, when the missile flew 35 meters, 35 kilometers in 2 minutes, is considered the most successful launch because at that time they managed to record all the parameters they wanted. There is also a theory that when the major accident occurred in Yonoksa, this disaster in which people died and there was a significant radiation release, was connected. One version is that it was related to this Burevestnik missile.
Putin didn't pull the Burevestnik out of his nuclear arsenal for nothing. It's just another tool for intimidation.
There's a whole frenzy being stirred up around this. Russia is portrayed as terrifyingly large, terrifyingly powerful, with a whole arsenal of weapons, 5,500 nuclear warheads, though no one really knows what condition they're in. But aside from Burstin, probably no one knows. Next, the deadline for Trump's ultimatum is approaching and something needs to be done now. That's why air traffic over Kapustin Yar is being shut down. So that everyone wonders what will be tested there, whether the Burevestnik will fly or something else. And the whole world gets tense. Then they announced that there will be more tests of the Burevestnik missile or something else.
Can the Russians conduct tests of the Burevestnik? Probably they can. Will it be successful? In Russia, they'll say yes, but as the statistics of previous tests show, only the Russians themselves might suffer from this launch.
No technology, no factories, no engineers. In Russia, in half a year, they managed to assemble only one passenger airplane. This is despite Putin's demand to revive the aviation industry as it was in the USSR.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Out of the 15 passenger planes planned for this year, Russian manufacturers were able to deliver only one to carriers, reports Reuters, citing data from CH Aviation, a Swiss aviation data and statistics service. The year 2025 will legally become the last year of flights for most aircraft in the fleets of Russian companies, says an aviation safety expert who wished to remain anonymous. According to him, the problem of missing spare parts will affect even the superjets, in which all critical components, engines, avionics, electrical equipment, landing gear, and fuel systems are of Western manufacture. The Russian Federation has gone around the world with an outstretched hand, but no one seems to be in a hurry to lease them any planes. And Ethiopia, in fact, delivered a real slap in the face to Russia. In July, Moscow approached Ethiopian Airlines with a request to lease Western aircraft under Ethiopian registration for flights within the Russian Federation. Well, that's understandable because their own planes are already falling apart as soon as they take off. For this purpose, the Russian Duma even amended the constitution. However, the Ethiopians still refuse to provide their planes for wet leasing. Well, that's the right decision. If something is falling apart as beautifully as the Russian aviation industry, why interfere with it? Details on how Addis Ababa sent Moscow packing are coming up in the story. While you watch, don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the Ukraine Today YouTube channel.
A new embarrassment for Putin. The Russian authorities asked to lease planes from Ethiopia but were refused.
I proceed from the assumption that we will continue to fly.
Russia is under sanctions from the United States, and Ethiopian Airlines has strong operational and commercial ties with the U.S. We operate in accordance with international law and are not prepared to violate it. Ethiopian Airlines is currently expanding its operations and also needs additional aircraft.
Air service with Ethiopia was established by Russia in 2018, but the share of flights is small, and the resources of Ethiopian Airlines are definitely insufficient to solve the problems in Russian aviation.
These airlines are very important for facilitating international trade, promoting vibrant tourism, and supporting various other essential activities that African countries actively conduct with the Russian Federation, fostering stronger bilateral relations and economic cooperation. Especially now when Russia is working a lot on relations between Russia and Africa.
Russia has already tried to make similar deals with Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Qatar, and Kuwait, but nothing came of it. At the same time, people are still being told that everything is fine and that hundreds of domestic aircraft will appear any day now.
And we are planning to produce over 1,000 aircraft by 2030, our own domestic aircraft.
At the moment, one of the main tasks, of course, is the production of civil aircraft. This is our top priority. If we talk about the MS-21, more than 70 systems and components have already been produced domestically in Russia as import substitutions. In August, an aircraft that is fully import substituted will take off. I was just at the factory in Irkutsk. There, 14 fuselages are almost ready and standing by, and another 9 are in the final stages of completion. As for the Superjet, our Superjet is also now fully import substituted.
But the number of accidents due to the lack of imported parts is only increasing, and more of them are fatal. Last year, the number of incidents rose by 30% compared to the previous year, but the Russian authorities are trying to hide the statistics. Today, the Ufa-Omsk flight sent out a distress signal.
The aircraft caught fire during takeoff.
The flight that departed from Magadan the day before could have ended dramatically.
And people are worried. Is it safe?
It turns out that there were a total of 670 reported incidents in the year 2023, but immediately they clarify and say that's 1.3% less
than the previous year.
When I read things like this, I wonder, what does 1.3% less even mean? And what about last year? How was that? Was that normal? But these failures have become more serious. I mean, if before, for example, engine failure cases happened, but not that often, now it's very frequent. In such a short period of time, I mean, this is official statistics, there are about 2,000 overdue spare parts. That is, if a part is supposed to be replaced, say, after 1,000 hours, but instead it's replaced after 1,200 or 1,300 hours to save money, then
that's already unsafe. For example, there was a recent incident involving the crash of a 60-year-old AN-24. For many months before the accident, passengers had been filming videos and writing to the airline about malfunctions during flights. 48 people died.
Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations rescuers arrived at the crash site. According to preliminary inspection, there are no survivors at the crash site.
I want to emphasize that it is important not to allow excessive increases in ticket prices while unconditionally ensuring the quality of passenger service and flight safety. These issues should be a priority for both carriers and the Ministry of Transport, as well as other relevant agencies.
But the situation is not improving, and Russian lawmakers are busy dealing with more serious matters.
Dear Vyacheslav Viktorovich, here is the magazine of a major Russian airline, where our citizens, passengers, are being offered French, Italian, and Spanish wines. The same situation exists in other airlines. In other words, we are essentially promoting wine products from countries that are unfriendly to us, while they in turn supply weapons to Kyiv.
And those responsible for technology in Russia are whining that they have been left alone with their problems.
There is probably not a single country in the world that produces 100% of the components for its own airplanes. For comparison, both Boeing and Airbus have about 9 such global suppliers. Major companies around the world that provide components for their aircraft. But we are forced to do everything ourselves, on our own.
When was there ever such a country, the Soviet Union?
Exactly, that's how it was in the Soviet Union.
They just forget to add that they have to twist and turn, lie, and put their own citizens at risk of death every day, all because one bloodthirsty old man, instead of retiring, wanted some action.